Hello everyone and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. There's a meme floating around the internet we'd like to share with you because of how correct its 60,000-foot view is. Here it is. We live in a society where homosexuals lecture us on morals, transvestites lecture us on human biology, baby killers lecture us on human rights, and socialists lecture us on economics. Now, as Catholics, we could add to that, we live in a church where heretics lecture us on doctrine, schismatics lecture us on obedience to tradition, money-grubbing bishops lecture us on social justice, and modernist theologians lecture us on our ignorance of theology. No matter where you turn, the world or the church, it's absolute clown world. Consider the insanity today emanating from both Rome and Washington, D.C., and moreover, consider the further insanity that arises in response to all that insanity in both spheres. When the Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl on the leg of kicker Harrison Butker, the Catholic trad world went wild online when his brown scapular was seen on the field. There it is right there. Great! All faithful Catholics adopt the brown scapular, of course. They wear it and love the scapular. However, one wonders just how effusive the praise from the trad big mouths online would have been if Butker did not attend the Latin Mass. The Latin Mass has become an idol to them, and anything goes in that world so long as it's related to the Latin Mass. It could be just looking the other way on clerical sex abuse in that world, because, the Latin Mass. It could be defending schism in that world, because, the Latin Mass. It could mean an overweening spiritual arrogance and hubris, because, the Latin Mass. It's like they should post placards and burn down Novus Ordo parishes chanting, TLM Lives Matter. This isn't to rag on the TLM, by no means. Virtually everyone, certainly most people here in the studio, attend the Latin Mass, frequently anyway, if not exclusively. It isn't the Mass itself that's the issue, by no means. How could it be? What it is the off-putting arrogance and insulting superiority of its leading online spokesman. If the old right is supposed to make people holier, as they all claim, well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we present to you its arrogant online promoters as Exhibit 1. The Mass of the Ages, as it is referenced, is beautiful, solemn, reverent, and fit worship of and for Almighty God. But that's the Mass. What about its online celebrity supporters? Is there really no other way to bring people around to its beauty than to ridicule and mock and condescend? It seems the beauty of the centuries-old liturgy stops at the communion rails when it comes to its online promoters. The silver bullet notion that all we have to do to solve the crisis in the church is have the Latin Mass, that's absurd on its face. Of course it's true, and Church Militant is on record for many years talking about and attacking the daily abuses in many of the most usual parishes, the ones that most people go to. It's true that reverent liturgy is an absolute key component of the much-needed restoration. But to isolate reverence to just one liturgical rite is nuts. Approximately 10% of worldwide Catholics attend rites other than the Latin rite. Those other rites are the Byzantine, the Alexandrian, the Syriac, the Armenian, the Maronite, and the Chaldean. These rites also break down into further ritual subdivisions depending on history and geography, and almost all of these rites far predate what we in the West today have come to know as the Latin rite, Latin Mass. They largely derive from the earliest centuries of the Church, which flourished more in the East than it did in the West. The reason why the first councils of the Church all happened on that side. Adherents in the Eastern rites wouldn't know a TLM from a hole in the ground. It's not their tradition. And in truth, their tradition came centuries and centuries before the liturgical traditions of the West took hold. Centuries. That's why in the Latin rite, we still have a vestige of the Eastern tongue present when we say the Kyrie eleison. That's not Latin, it's Greek. Likewise, it would be curious to do some form of survey or demographic outline and actually count heads around the world. How many Catholics, again, around the world, actually sit in a TLM each Sunday compared to how many actually are sitting in one of the Eastern rites? Add them all together. It's a guess, but we'll venture there are more Catholic bodies, again, around the world, at the universal church, in the Eastern Rite than the TLM on any given Sunday. The entire Eastern world of the church is largely unknown, or at least a mystery, to those of us raised in the Latin Rite here in the West. But to the point of just how Catholic it is, Bishop Sheen was bi-ritual, meaning he offered Mass in the Latin Rite and then could just walk across the street and offer Mass in the Eastern Rite in one of their parishes. The point is, it's all Catholic. However, that said, and furthering the whole clown world theme, this all makes you wonder exactly why Pope Francis seemingly has it out for the TLM. Correct or not, he is under the impression that a liturgical schism has begun between the TLM and the Novus Ordo adherents, which of course was the exact opposite reason Pope Benedict freed the Latin Mass from its earlier confines, to show that each would become more incorporated into the other. Francis is of the mind, apparently, that the TLM crowd are even more at odds with the Novus Ordo crowd, and regardless of any hidden motivations heavily speculated about, which might be true, he has said he wants to put an end to all of that. Of course, he could just go after the Novus Ordo Mass, but he doesn't. Likewise, he could correct the zillions of abuses that occur at the Novus Ordo Mass, and for that matter, so too could the bishops, who, once again, have sat on their hands for decades and whose inaction has created this liturgical clown world we're all now witness to. In fact, in truth, it was the slow creep of liturgical abuse, again, permitted by the bishops and in some cases encouraged by the really more modernist ones, that set the stage for all of this, for all of it. Those of us who remember what the initial, original modifications were to the liturgy were not jarred in the slightest. It was when the craziness started creeping in that we, at the time young altar boys, were scratching our heads and going, what's this all about? Why are we doing that now and we're not doing what we used to do? As a young altar boy, and yes, boy, as opposed to the non-specific altar server, I used to hold the paten under the chins of kneeling communicants at the altar rail. Yeah, I'm that old. Then it all got phased out, and pretty quickly. Why did the bishops allow that? And more to the point, why don't they now correct it? I know CM gets grief from many people about constantly talking about the failings of the bishops, but hey, if the mitre fits. Of course, every single problem, of course, in the church can be laid at the feet of the bishops because they refuse to ever address the crisis in any substantive way, ever. When you talk about clown world, at least in the church, the clown is wearing a mitre. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.